We don't have any. That's Monica. I guess, I see the screen now, so I guess we're... So good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our board retreat of the Wake County Board of Education. We have been working for some time to try to get this time together as a board to discuss some sort of bigger ticket or big picture items, namely today our strategic plan. And it's been a little challenging to find that typical weekend time that we do, so we're here a few hours early to spend a little cozy time together as we are here back around the table. So good to see and feel everybody here and being a little bit tighter, but a welcome sight and welcome feel. So we are here this afternoon, like I said, for a couple of hours to get an update on our strategic plan and begin that process of that 3-year, 5-year, wherever we are, in terms of embarking on that important work. So I don't have much to offer in that regard. I'm not driving today. I think, Kathy, you, Dr. Gardner, not sure who's driving, but I'll turn it over to you, and we'll go from there. So good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. As you know, we were nearing the end of our Vision 2020 strategic plan as the pandemic hit. We had done a bit of work prior to March of 2020 in preparation for transition in terms of some feedback sessions and some planning and some work with the leadership team. And then, getting feedback in a number of different places. That's where we sort of introduced that platform thought exchange that we've used several times for large-scale feedback. And so as we then went into sort of more of a crisis mode with planning for an unexpected start to the school year and a really difficult past year, we've continued to do some work in the background and sort of re-energize that work in the last few months as we are coming hopefully to the other side of this pandemic, and we do need to engage in sort of refreshing ourselves with where we were with the strategic plan, where we left it off, and the work that we had done prior to the pandemic break, so to speak, where we are now, and refocusing on that work so that we can go into the next version of our strategic plan. Want to engage the board in that. So we'll spend a little time today with some sort of review, refresher, because not all of you were on the board when that strategic plan was developed. You experienced it in some large or small way once you were on the board, but I think it's important to understand it, where it came from, and then where we are now. You've seen some elements of the things that you've seen today in a few places here and there, but we're going to try to sort of put it together for you so you understand the flow and understand what our next steps are going to be. This is important work for us, for the district, for all of our stakeholder groups in the community, and we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for folks to understand that and for us to have the platform to discuss our priorities and our needs so that we can continue to do work for the great kids and families of Wake County. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Lloyd Gardner.
And as Dr. Gardner's coming, as I normally do in terms of just sort of setting the stage, we're joined by all board members here today, with the exception of Ms. Kushner. She is traveling. She will not be with us for the retreat, but she will be with us virtually for the work session and board meeting. Other than that, we have all board members here and Superintendent Moore and with staff. So again, Dr. Gardner.
Chair Sutton, members of the board, and Superintendent Moore, good afternoon. We're excited to have this opportunity to be with you this afternoon to engage in some discussions that will be critical to setting the pathway for identifying our next version of strategic priorities and strategic plan. I know that you've been spending some time to try to identify this date, and we're glad we finally arrived to one that we can engage in this conversation. And the discussion this afternoon is going to be in part presenting some information with you and sharing some items with you, as well as providing an opportunity for you to engage in some discussions, giving us input, because it's critical for us to hear from you about the pathway that you see going forward and some of the work that will shape the direction we go. Our desired outcomes for this afternoon, if I could ask for our slide presentation to be presented. We hope by the end of our time together this afternoon, we will have an understanding of the current state of our strategic planning. We will have time for a retrospective of Vision 2020 and the last year that we've just experienced. Gain insight into the theory of action that will set the foundation for the strategic priorities and drive the implementation of the strategic plan, and receive clarity around our next steps. So, to get started, our first part of our afternoon will be devoted to regrounding ourselves, pretty much as Superintendent Moore just said, regrounding and reorienting ourselves around the current Strategic Plan Vision 2020 in terms of some key elements. Then we will transition just for a brief moment about actions that have been already started as well as currently are occurring to set the pathway and to make that bridge from one strategic plan to the next strategic plan. And that's where we will have some group discussions from you in doing that work. If you will join me in looking at this first slide, next slide, in 2015, when we adopted the new strategic plan, we embraced this vision as shown on the slide. This vision was used to guide our work and continues to guide our work. And it states, all Wake County Public School System students will be prepared to reach their full potential and lead productive lives in a complex and changing world. Our vision, in combination with our mission statement, really set the stage. Our mission statement reinforces our commitment to delivering a relevant and engaging education. But it goes beyond and above just giving students the knowledge they need. It also speaks to the skills they need, and that's clearly reflected in this mission statement that we created. We recognize that learning must go well beyond memorization and a rote recall of facts. It also must speak to the student's ability to apply their learning and have the skills necessary to do that. And that's why you see in this mission statement a focus on students' ability to collaborate and work in teams, to be creative in producing their work as well as reaching solutions, to be effective communicators in both oral and written communication, and to be able to exercise critical thinking and problem solving. So you can see it goes well beyond the content, but also the skills and knowledge, the skills in applying the knowledge they learn. Also, in addition to the mission and vision, we had a very ambitious goal. Our goal was that we will annually graduate at least 95% of our students ready for productive citizenship, as well as higher education or a career. This is one of several metrics that we had in place to monitor and measure our work tied to the Strategic Plan Vision 2020. While we're not including time in today's retreat focus to give a detailed presentation of metrics, I do want to highlight some things around the graduation goal. You do have in your materials a document that speaks to some metrics around various elements of Vision 2020. And in a previous Student Achievement Committee, those metrics were highlighted. So I'll share that with you for your reference. But in relationship to this goal, I want to take a moment to reflect, highlight, and celebrate in particular. This is the first time in 2020 that we have reached a graduation rate above 90%. It is the highest rate we have ever received in our school district, and leading up to this particular percentage have been annual increases every year since 2012. So that is something to celebrate not only as a school district, but as our community as well. Tied to our vision, mission, and goal, we also had a set of core beliefs, and they are at the heart of what we do. They reflect our commitment, what we believe, what we stand for, and what we value. The first belief continues to serve as a cornerstone for our work and focus. It emphasizes our belief that every student deserves to be engaged in meaningful learning each day, and we often pare it down to every student each day as we speak about the work that we do and our focus on each individual student. Our other core values speak to our commitment to eliminate the predictability of achievement based on factors such as social economic status, race, and/or ethnicity. It also speaks to the value we place on staffing. It speaks to the importance of continuous improvement, innovation, and risk-taking that we all know are critical to a high-performing organization. It also speaks to our value that we place on a diverse, inviting, inclusive, and supportive school community. And one of the last core beliefs speaks to our commitment to community engagement and having strong community school partnerships. At the time we developed Vision 2020 and the collective elements of the vision, the mission, the core values, and our goal, we also identified 5 key objective areas. And those 5 key objective areas included learning and teaching, achievement, balanced assessment, human capital, and community involvement. Those were the 5 areas that guided our district work and our school-based work. Now, to get to all those elements, our roadmap that we took is that we involved the community in shaping them. And it might be helpful just to briefly review that process. One of our key avenues for gathering input involved a community town hall meeting, during which community, parents, school staff, central services staff, and others came together and participated in roundtable discussions offering input. That input was compiled, it was unpacked to clearly understand its meaning and its relevance, and then it was sorted into top priority areas for focus, thus the 5 key areas that I just identified. In addition, a task force of individuals representing various stakeholder groups across our schools and community was used to develop the vision, the mission, the core beliefs, and the goal that I just reviewed with you. A series of meetings was also facilitated to wordsmith to make sure that we had it just right and to reflect what we meant in each one of those guiding elements to guide our work. Now, today, as we highlight the current state of the actions we've been taking to get us to pivot our attention from one strategic plan to the next version strategic plan, I want to briefly walk through a timeline that charts actions we have already taken and we are currently taking to set our next strategic priorities and ultimately our next version of the strategic plan. As illustrated on this timeline, knowing we were in the last leg of our current plan, Vision 2020, we started in spring of 2019 and fall of 2019 setting the stage because we knew we needed that critical bridge to take us from one plan to the next plan. So we started doing some fundamental preliminary work to set the stage. To set a strong foundation, we first focused on developing a theory of action, our theory of action that would guide the district in its work and inform its work for identifying the next strategic priorities. To develop our theory of action, we devoted much time analyzing student performance data and conducting focus sessions across all levels of our schools in our district. We'll outline more in detail in our afternoon session about what our theory of action is and what it entails so that you have a greater understanding of what it is and how it will guide our work. From our theory of action that's firmly grounded and informed by data, as well as the input that we gathered, district leadership began to use that to identify what are our key challenges that we know we need to and must address in this next strategic plan. We began to use it to kind of set the questions and to set our mindset and roadmap for the next strategic plan. Similar to our interest in hearing from stakeholder groups in the first strategic plan that we just highlighted, we began to embark upon that journey of gathering other input. Our first focus was on the schools, gathering input from principals, assistant principals, and teachers. All of this was pre-COVID, with a plan in place to branch it out to other community groups as well. We started this process during winter 2020, prior to our experience with the pandemic. We were well underway of conducting focus sessions and leveraging technology tools and applications to gather input from stakeholder groups. Fortunately, prior to COVID-19, we gained a wealth of information that will be useful in adding to the additional input we gather in the coming months. We challenged them to identify areas from Vision 2020 that they know we need to continue to build upon, as well as areas that we may no longer need to have as a plan given the change in data, given the change in student needs, and the like. Schools were actually in the stages of implementing focus groups at each one of their schools so that we would hear from every staff member in this process. To add to the input we'd already gotten from our school-based leaders and teachers like in the Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council, all the way to all staff that's in the building to get new as well as to affirm what we were hearing. Most schools were in the stages and able to complete this process. Others had to press pause when in March we found ourselves having to pivot to remote learning. They are prepared and ready to re-engage with that work once we give them the opportunity to do so, and probably will in the fall. We were also just at the threshold of gathering input from you, the board, our central services personnel, and our community when we had to turn our attention and full energy to COVID-19 response and recovery. But now we're ready to go back and re-engage in that work. We will unpack the input that we did gather pre-COVID with you as a board in one of the later sessions so that you too can begin to see the themes that are clearly surfacing in some of that input. And I'm sure will be reinforced with additional input that we gather once we start again with the input sessions. But I do want to highlight one aspect of the feedback that we did start receiving, and that is, clearly, do not start over completely. Build upon. Don't disregard. Too much work and too much of what we believe as schools and a school system is reflected in our current core beliefs and our current work that we're doing. Don't discard everything, but streamline the focus so that we can be targeted in our focus and not fragmented, and we can be targeted based on the data. We've heard them. So we will continue to use that kind of as a guide and a lens as we continue collecting input and shaping that input into what the strategic priorities are going to be. So that brings us on the chart in 2020. We're now re-engaging in the work, thankfully, knowing that we will still be addressing the impact of COVID-19 on our schools and operations. We recognize that we will more than likely need a transition year in this work when opening our schools in the fall and taking into account the pace in which we enter this strategic plan. We also have heard clearly from principals as we begin to look to next year to be mindful of all that will continue to remain on their plates as they go back into a full school year, and also be mindful of the pace in which we enter a new strategic plan. Still have a focus, but to use that focus as a lead-in to our eventual strategic priorities that we have. So, aside from how we enter a new version of the strategic plan, we recognize there's some fundamental critical work that remains to be done, and that is to continue the input sessions that were interrupted in our workflow and our processes. We were in the process of gathering input from stakeholders, and we indeed gathered invaluable feedback. But we want to continue this. We know we're not finished hearing from the voices of our stakeholders. We want to have the voice of central services, our board, students, and our community at large. And that's input in addition to revisiting with our principals what you said before, because what they shared before was pre-COVID. And we know that during the last year that they've experienced, some of that will be altered, some of it will be informed by their experiences, and some will be shaped, especially as we see how we might want to do things different after having lived the last year that we have lived. From our community in particular, we anticipate that we will structure smaller community-focused sessions to collect input. We were planning to do this before pre-COVID, knew we were not going to be able to gather large groups with social distancing and face masking and all that, but we want to have community groups in the late summer, fall, to collect input, leveraging groups such as partnerships, our parent groups, our board advisory, community advocacy groups, whether it's WakeUp Partnership, YMCA, and other groups that we can leverage. We will use this time to collect new input, build upon input we've already gathered, and, just as important, affirm and validate the input that we collected pre-COVID in order to identify common themes, alignment, and ownership. Looking even further, we would like to forecast that we have the data to allow us to confirm those strategic priorities by the time we return from winter break. We see using January and February of 2022 to begin to socialize strategic priorities with a launch later that semester, probably in the spring, so that we can have a launch of strategic priorities in preparation for our opening of year-round schools. We often hear that we don't launch our things until after the year-round schools start. We want to be ahead of that. So we want to launch in May of June of next year what those priorities could be so that year-round schools have them for their beginning. During this time to come, moving forward, we not only want to finalize what our strategic priorities will be, we want to identify milestones for how we would measure them, and the action steps by departments across central services as well as schools of how to reach the goals that we establish. At this time, I'm going to introduce the retrospective section that we want you to engage in, and a similar activity that we had our school-based staff engaged in. Beth Severia is going to lead you in that small group discussion. We're going to divide you into 3 groups with key questions that we want to have you engage in dialogue. Those key questions will speak to our current Vision 2020 moving forward about what we would like to amplify, what might we like to sunset, or what we might like to create new. We look forward to your input. We're going to put you in different groups, and since we pretty much have the room, you don't have to necessarily stay in the stations that we're going to put you in if you need more room. You will find at your station's chart paper where you will document your input and thoughts and perspectives. You have a supply box with Post-it notes, markers, highlighters, and the like, and you also have some cards that will lead you through the actual protocol after Beth leads you through the directions. We look forward to you engaging in this, and we look forward to your thoughts that you will share. Beth?
Good afternoon, everyone. As Dr. Gardner said, understanding that you, like staff, really need an opportunity to engage in some reflection and just pause for a moment on where we've been, not only the last year, but where we were before that. We've planned for you an activity for the next hour to engage in those 3 questions that Dr. Gardner mentioned to you. We will go ahead to the next slide. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to move to one of those 3 designated stations across the room to engage in discussion in small groups. And at your station, you'll find chart paper with the first question for your discussion focus. At this first station, you will engage in discussion and you'll track your ideas on the chart paper that's provided. So we get to go old school again, like we haven't in a long, long time. You will then have the opportunity to move to the next station and then the next station so that you do get to engage in all 3 questions, not just one question. We'll build upon the ideas as you move through each of the stations that your colleagues had already left for you. So it's a little bit of a modified gallery walk, and I think most of you have probably engaged in that type of protocol with us at some point or another. After reviewing and responding to all 3 of the questions, you'll return to your original question to discover themes and additional considerations that you might want each other to think about or that you might want staff to consider. And I'll provide additional guidance at that time. At this time, though, I'd like to give you just a few moments to think about those questions. We provided a reflection sheet for you, so you can pull that out or just use some paper that you have to consider the 3 questions that we've presented. And then I'll give you some directions to move you off into your stations. Are there any questions before I give you just a moment? The 3 questions are: what might you like to amplify in the next strategic plan, and why?
It's not in our plan.
Okay, then just.
It's on the slide. It's on the slide.
It is on the slide. I thought we had.
Yeah, I just thought we had it.
That's okay. That's okay. You can just use your note catcher.
So we are answering all 3 questions.
You're going to answer all 3 questions ultimately. So you take a moment to jot down your ideas about each of the 3 questions, and then we'll take one at a time.
Based on the slide, it looks like we each have 1 question.
You do at first, but you will have all 3.
Okay.
Okay. you should have a note catcher, but if not, just use the slides or a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So just real quick, as a point of clarification, those are the three groups that are on the slide on the screen now. All three groups will engage in discussion about all three questions,
Yes.
all in one long span of time, and then we come back, or are we doing a period of time for first question, a period of time for the second question, a period of time for third question?
Yes, the second one.
The second one.
Right now, you're engaging in reflection on all three of the questions, just independently.
Independent reflection right now.
And then I'm going to send you off into your first group where you will answer one question. I'll give you about 15 minutes. Then you'll move to the second poster where you'll focus on the second question, so on and so forth.
So there will be some movement.
Movement.
Okay.
And,
All right.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Been a while. Yes.
I need a little more guidance. When we say the strategic plan, you've identified all these components: mission statement, vision statement, core beliefs. When you go through like the profile of the graduate, you have specific things like knowledge, effective communication. What's the scope of how we're taking all that?
So,
Or is it
yes.
limited at one level?
It's not limited at any level. We wanted to start pretty big and broad before we get in future sessions with you. We're going to start getting more narrow. But because we haven't engaged in this in quite some time, we just wanted you to be able to have the opportunity to think of this last year as well as it was 4 years before that we had been engaged in the strategic plan work. And we know that you've had some opportunity for some updates over the last year, but very minimal. So we wanted to pick it up, bring you up, have an opportunity just to think big, and then over a few other sessions, we'll get more and more narrow. Does that help?
You had like a Vision 2020 document at one point.
Yes.
That laid out, is that sort of what we should use as sort of a template?
You can use that, or even just the things that Dr. Gardner already reviewed with you, because those are the mission, vision, the 5 objectives. Those are all the foundation of the strat plan from the last few years, from 2015.
I guess it's those 5.
And then the core beliefs, yes, those are the 5 objectives that we have. Sure. take just another moment to jot down any thoughts, and then you'll have plenty of time to engage in discussion with each other in just a moment. All right. So as a reminder, you will have an opportunity to engage with all three questions in your small groups. We will return to our whole group to share the themes that arose, as well as any final considerations that we may need to consider as we work together and move forward into our next strategic plan. You will have 15 minutes in the first group for your discussion. If we could go back to the slide with the questions and the groups, please. On this slide, you'll see that Group 1 is Ms. Cash, Ms. Scott, and Mr. Sutton, and you will, in just a moment, begin over where the chart paper is right here to my right. Group 2 is Ms. Johnson-Hostler, Ms. Kushner was going to maybe send some ideas. She did already, thank you. And Dr. Martin. And your poster is right behind you. We were thinking you could be here at the board table, but since we do have so much room, feel free to find another spot. And Group 3 is Ms. Carter, Mr. Haggerty, and Ms. Mahaffey, and your table is set up over here to the left. So you will, when you get to your first station, just engage in some dialogue about the question, the first question that's on your actual chart. It's listed there for you. Jot down as many ideas as you can think of. This is your opportunity to brainstorm very freely about those questions. And then I'll provide you some next steps of instructions before you move on to Group 2.
This is what your chart will look like. It will have the question in the corner, the question you're starting with. Take markers and just chart all your ideas that you're brainstorming, no limitations. Just put what comes to mind that you want. Then when you rotate to the next group, it will have the next question in the corner that you focus on until you have opportunity to engage in all three questions. Okay?
What questions can I answer for you? All right. Oh, yes?
One rotates through 3 seconds or down.
I'm going to give you the next set of instructions after you've had a chance to focus on this. I didn't want to throw it all at you at one time. All right. All right. Thank you. So Group 1, go ahead and we can break into our different groups. Group 1 over here to my right, 2 here at the board table, and then 3 to my left. And we'll come around and ensure that you get started well.
Maybe the back of that wall.
Oh, okay, that sounds good.
That post. Okay.
while you're at your table, because the slide deck is down, I'm going to ask that you pick up the document that says Gallery Walk Step 2. There's a picture of a slide right there next to your chart paper. It'll help you as I explain what you have to do next. All right.
If we could all come back together now so that we can begin to rotate to our next group.
Stay where you are, though. And I'm going to give you your next instruction. All right, so if you would pull up the slide that says Gallery Walk Step 2, because you don't have the slide deck being displayed right now, I'm just going to walk you through what I want you to do when you move to your next station. You're going to arrive at that station with a lot of ideas already presented, so you don't have to start completely over. It is important that you engage in a good bit of discussion, though, and we want you to do it in a couple of ways. We want you to think
balance right, but we're not going to win them all. They're challenging environments with judges that are favorable to the families, and they have to pay the other side's attorneys fees. It's just really, really challenging.
All right, it's all fine. I'll wait till he comes in. That's fine.
begin our transition to the last group and the last station.
I've already read this. Yeah.
All right. All right, go ahead and finish up your last thoughts and make your way back to your original table where I will give you your instructions to what you're going to do there. Just go ahead and move back to your original station.
saw the news story yesterday on the new town manager for
Thank you
APEC.
so
It
much for
was interesting.
engaging in those discussions. Now we want to hear from you all about what you consolidated, what summary can you take, because not everybody got to go back and see what everybody wrote. So the reporters for each group are going to share a high-level summary of what you wrote down on your ideas, your questions, your additions. And then I will collect the charts for you. We'll get it all into a document so that you have a record of it, and we can use it as we move forward into the future. So group one, where's group one? I think it's over here. So
Yeah.
Ms. Scott, is that Ms. Cash? It is. All right.
Well, we were talking about doing every child is saving for each child. I know there was a question about what child would that mean? STEM or ELESD. We do mean all of it, and I know that we have to clear about that. So we incorporated it in the others and things like that.
And Ms. Cash, your question was, what should we amplify? Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone, what do we want to amplify, what do we want to consider? Thank you.
There were commonality between other people's groups about risk taking and kind of what was risk taking. Some of us, I was thinking in our group a little more about our central office, benchmarking with bigger school districts outside of North Carolina and mirroring that more. That's hard, thinking more of what we're going to do that is hard to break down. But in addition, other people added good points about risk taking. We support our students being risk taking and our staff and our teachers and our principals, and we need to let them innovate from within their schools, and we try to support that. And that's what we're doing wherever we can. We all do on equity. And equity, we define it, however, in our core beliefs, we have certain beliefs that might come together in equity, or some talk about equity, but we aren't necessarily living that belief right now. So I think the equity piece is, shared by everybody, and it's going to be high level. I think there's a lot of notes about community engagement. So how we can have community engagement, to amplify that in our plan, how is it getting people invested in the schools, that help young stories, kids, and all the different populations that want to use the public schools, how do we get all of them?
Anything else for that group? Thank you. All right, question number 2 was, what might you like to see us sunset in order to make way for new things? Dr. Martin?
Yeah, so Monique and I and Christine took some notes, and from you all's notes, I think a lot of people have the same question that we do: why do we sunset? There's a lot in the community. The strategic plan has a lot that we buy in, and like staff, then don't just give us another change. It's not easy to say, here, take this out. I think there's a really strong sense of core beliefs are there. Christine noted, and Monique and I agree, and you did as well, there's probably value in streamlining the language, but not necessarily getting rid of. Christine talked about, let me just directly write it down, but over here, she noted, she suggested potentially 3 groups: 1 students, 2 educators and staff, and 3 families and communities. So potentially, that kind of 3 bucket. I think as we talked, and there's questions here, part of the challenge maybe of our last strategic plan is a lot of times the community heard one thing, graduation rate. And that became kind of a blinders that narrowed the focus to everything else that was in the strategic plan. So while goals and focus are valuable and necessary, we have to be a little bit careful of oversimplification, because that 95% is most of what was heard. We even didn't hear the rest of it, college and career ready, and enhanced citizenship, right? Our metrics on those are a long ways from 95%. The 95% is even a stretch goal for regular graduation, although you could push anybody across the state and get to a number. So being careful going forward, how we frame the strategic plan, there needs to be goals, but we want to make sure that it doesn't, there's not quite the one thing that becomes diversionary to everything else and we lose the big thing. Sort of reinforced as we went around and looked at the other pages as well as our own notes, there's a lot of things that are really important for us as a system that don't sort of fit on the one pager of the strategic plan. I think there was a lot of value in trying to have that one pager that communicated to the community. I think the one pager of the core beliefs has been a very powerful document to talk in the community. At the same time, like Mr. Haggerty's question, what's the strategic plan that we're talking about? So I think we sort of maybe, I don't want to say erred, but we challenged ourselves by trying to condense it maybe a little bit too much. And so I think going forward, maybe we need a little bit more of an expansive, what is our strategic plan? And then that needs to be able to be condensed into the nice one pager for communication. But we need something that's a little bit deeper. And I think we have a lot of that in each of these components. Right? If we think about it, there's teaching and learning, achievement, balanced assessment, human capital, community engagement. As Monique and I came back and reflected after looking at everybody else, the one thing that we felt that seems to be matched everywhere else is the piece of that that's missing there is sustainability. But it almost felt like if we added a sustainability bucket to each of these buckets, that could be a good framework. And then and I remember that we had sort of a fleshed out document with a lot of bullet points with each of these, but they never got refined into the strategic plan. The strategic plan really became, the vision, the mission, and the core beliefs, and that was it. All of that's important, but I think if you think about the complexity of the system, right? We're a $2 billion business. We need more than a one pager. We need the one pager, but we need a little more than the one pager. And so I'd say that's where we landed on the maybe sunset. Does that sort of capture Malika and what everybody else?
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Ms. Drake, what would you like to see created?
All right, so our group had several ideas, and then as people came in, we had some agreement from other groups, and then we had other questions. So it seemed like there was a lot of support for this idea of safety and wellness somehow being incorporated into the plan at some level. Parents, guardians, whomever they be, they entrust their children to us every day, and that's an important value that we think needs to be reflected or captured somehow. That's SEL, that's physical safety. There's a lot of different components to that. I'll go down to some others that have more check marks. Sustainability goals, again, we talked about that. It come up before in one, it was fiscal and environmental responsibility, and someone asked what we meant. And while that was trying to be cute, take two ideas and put them into one bucket. The idea of stewardship, right? That we have to effectively manage our resources. And so the idea that we talk about organizational efficiency and how that drives decisions. We're stewards of people's tax dollars. We don't have enough to do all that we would want to do. So how do we use what we have efficiently with that that's also in terms of environmental responsibility. That was, again, how we don't have waste, how we have conservation of energy, conservation of water, a lot of the other things, sustainability goals. The equity statement, again, somewhere, and there was a question, what is the definition of equity for WCPSS? And I think that's something in a lot of our concurrent work we're working toward, really trying to come up with a good, succinct, communicatable statement that makes that clear. Other questions is recognition of subgroups. This was something that came out in some of the other groups in terms of amplifying. When we say all children, do we want to put anywhere in the plan special emphasis to make sure people know we're talking about this is all kids, and yes, we mean special education students, we mean English language learners, we mean children in AIG. We need somewhere to be more specific than just all kids. So that's really, I think, where Lindsay, that was yours. Did you have anything to add to our?
I think that was
the recognition of subgroups. Yeah. Get a little more intentional with the inclusivity. Yeah. There were other ideas that other people had brought out, directly addressing school health, healthy schools, integration. There's also some ideas around community resources, volunteerism, and so the thought that we had taking a lot of these additional ideas is that you could combine them into including some sort of philanthropy and volunteerism statement within the section on community engagement. We say we want the community involved, we don't always necessarily say how. That is soliciting ideas, but sometimes that is accepting and soliciting help and resources that are out there in the community. So we thought a lot of these might be able to go into like an expanded section on community engagement. Anything I would do highlight that we would have left out? All right, thank you, Rob.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. So I think that as you hear in just a moment about our theory of action and the work that we've done around trying to spell that out, how we believe, what we believe, and how we should act that out, you're going to start to see a lot of connections between the things that you've shared and thought of in your groups and that work. So I look forward to the discussion that you're going to have after this part too. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Gardner to review that work.
I know it's been a while since we had the opportunity to re-engage and re-ground ourselves in that work.
Is that mic on?
Yes. Now it is. It's a good comeback. And the opportunity to reground and re-engage this work. Thank you for the high-level engagement you demonstrated during this small group session. Your observations, your ideas, your input are just invaluable, and I know that they will find a place in the input going forward with the input that we have already gathered and input that we will continue to gather. So thank you for that. It's great feedback. As I shared earlier, one of the fundamental steps that district leadership took to set that pathway for our next strategic plan and to kind of bridge from one plan to the next, we did something very enlightening and challenging for us, and that is to create a theory of action for our district. And at this time, I want to walk you through that theory of action of what it is and what it entails. First, I want to review the purpose of a theory of action, and I'll draw your attention to the green box on the left-hand side of the slide. When we talk about a theory of action, it is really our belief that's grounded in analysis of data about how we move from one current state to our desired state as an organization. It outlines accountabilities for individuals, each person, in order for our students to experience the learning, relationships, and services necessary to succeed. Now, as we embarked upon this as a district leadership group, a preliminary step we took to set the direction involved challenging ourselves with a key question. We asked ourselves, how do we as an organization and district need to structure our systems, our processes, to really increase the success of our students and our supporting operations? There were several steps we took in the process of developing our theory of action. If you'll follow along with me on the right-hand side of the chart, that points out the activities that we engaged in as district leadership. As a fundamental document for our work, we turned to research and exemplars provided by Wallace Foundation. We spent many hours studying this work, engaging in reflection activities, engaged in small group focus sessions, unpacking the implications, principles, and concepts of what a theory of action even is and how it could guide our work. We analyzed what is working and what is not working for our students. We examined this through several lenses: classroom teaching, principal instructional leadership, and ultimately central services, practices, structures, and systems that potentially impact and contribute to the performance of our students. I will say, as I've mentioned already, one of the most insightful and invaluable activities that we conducted included focus sessions at all of our schools across all levels, elementary, middle, and high. We had district leadership, SLT, in groups go out to schools and conduct focus sessions with students, with school-based administrators, and teachers, asking what they needed, what they wanted to see, what would better support them, what they were struggling with. We used this input and gave it to our data research and accountability. They compiled it and they sorted it so that we could have common themes associated with the work to set the foundation. In addition, we studied our student performance data from years past. We also looked at the survey results from teacher working conditions, our student district surveys, our teacher district surveys, to see what we could glean from how our students operate and what it would take to help them be successful. Not only them, but our teachers and our overall operations. And using all this data and input collectively, we wrote our theory of action. Now, the next slide highlights a quote that resonated with our SLT. I won't read it to you, but I will highlight that it acknowledges the commitment, the time, and energy it takes to recreate our central services in order for us to meet the needs of individuals and to impact their performance. We're not afraid of this work. We are ready to take on this work, and we're ready to see what we need to do differently with regard to our structures and systems to support our students, schools, and operations. The next slide highlights data points that were key to us in writing our theory of action. I will go through these to highlight them because of their significance and importance in informing us. Academic gaps between student subgroups are evidenced in grade 3 remain stable over the next 6 to 7 years. Many students come to school with talents that are not reflected in traditional academic achievement measures. Lack of achievement, subgroup achievement steps, and discipline data are interconnected. We see the same gaps among subgroups, especially children of color, on all of these measures, and the gaps may be related to each other. Our African American student subgroups report less positive student-teacher relationships than our white and Asian students. And fewer middle and high school students report positive relationships with teachers than do our elementary students. Now, these are at a high level, but they are some data points that were given to us from our Data Research and Accountability Department after their compilation, synthesis, and research. They informed much about what we need to do with regard to systems and structures. Our next slide points out what our theory of action is. I've told you what a theory of action should be, and now I want to show you what ours entails. And you will see it starts from central services and cascades all the way down to the classroom with the students. If central services functions as a differentiated support system for schools and outlines the expectations for success for each school and identifies the measures for that success, then principals serve as the instructional leaders of their school and align the work in the school to the district-defined expectations for success. And they leverage the resources that are differentiated for that school based on data and need, and provide strategic input and feedback on school needs, so that teachers then can focus on understanding and implementing the instructional core. Now, just a side note, the instructional core and its reference, we're going to unpack for the board in some other future sessions of what we really mean by that in detail, but I just want to kind of put that side note for you. But focus on understanding and implementing what we call the instructional core and demonstrate leadership in their feedback and decisions for students and their school. in order for our students to make positive connections to the school, to maximize their learning, to exercise agency in their learning through feedback and participation, and ultimately to graduate on time. That is the theory of action we wrote as a senior district leadership in response to our data analysis, the feedback that we got, such as those focus groups, and sets the foundation for us in bridging one strategic plan to the next. At this time, we're going to engage you in a second small group discussion where you have the opportunity to independently reflect on what you've just heard around the theory of action and answer some questions. We look forward to your responses in this. This particular group session will not be as long as the other, but we do want to engage you in some questions for your processing and digesting, and it all won't occur today. But we do see this as a fundamental step for setting our work forward. How do we change our structures and systems to support operations, our schools, students, and teachers? And if we do these things from central services down, cascaded to the students, the difference and impact it will make with regard to student work. There's a lot to unpack under each one of those bullets, but this is at a level that outlines what we mean by a theory of action in terms of accountability for each individual at different levels. Beth, I'm going to turn it over to you now to walk you through this second and last small group discussion.
Thank you. All right, so I imagine that there's a lot going on in your minds right now around the theory of action, being as it's the first time you've seen that. You'll have the opportunity to kind of reflect, pull your own thoughts together first, and then go into your small groups where you'll likely have more questions for us about the theory of action, which is expected and anticipated and will be helpful for us as we plan our future sessions with you all. So what I would like for you to do is to make sure you have this sheet. I didn't have it handy with me the last time, sorry about that, but this green and white sheet, that is your reflection for theory of action. And I'm going to give you a few moments to reflect on what you've just heard. You can go back through the slide deck and the documents that were shared with you around our theory of action, because you might want to see some of the language. And you're going to think about these three questions, and you'll see that one of the questions at the end that we have left for you is, what other thoughts or questions do you have? Understanding that you likely will. So are there any questions that I can answer for you about the process that I need you to go through here in just a moment?
Requesting these to be collected. I mean, I have a lot of my own notes. I'll be glad to transfer some of the ideas if you're looking to collect them. If these are just for our exercise, I don't need to transfer them.
We were going to ask for volunteers to collect them, right? We were going to, after you go into your small groups and have some discussion, we were going to ask if anybody who was willing to let us have it, and we'll give it back to you, but that way we can consolidate your thinking as well and use it for future. So,
You have one more new one?
excuse me?
You have a new one?
No, I have.
Oh, I thought you.
Yeah.
One from each.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Question is, we can transfer them
Okay.
And read the questions for
turn them in, or is it
Okay.
internal?
Got it. All right, so a couple of updates. We are going to collect one from each group, and then also I need to read the questions aloud. So the questions that I would like for you to consider right now: in what ways do you see our core beliefs aligned with our theory of action? So thinking about those core beliefs we just talked about a little while ago. And what policy or funding implications might the board need to engage to support the district's theory of action? And what other thoughts or considerations might you have to offer related to the theory of action? So I'll give you a few about 5 minutes to reflect on those three questions, and then I'll put you in some small groups again. Okay. So I know that you have some more thinking to do, but as you get into your groups, you'll have some time to do that, and I want to be able to maximize your time for dialogue and discussion with each other. So if we could see the next slide, please. This slide will have your discussion groups. So we've a new group for you to engage with. You'll have roughly 15 minutes to discuss the questions, and then we'll come back and report out and just share kind of the major themes that your group discussed. So if we could have group one with Ms. Cash, Ms. Mahaffey, and Dr. Martin come over here to where Dr. Gardner is directing you to my right, and then Ms. Carter, Mr. Haggerty, and Ms. Johnson-Hostler. If you could come up, right over here to my left. And then group three with Ms. Scott and Mr. Sutton, if you could go back to the back table there. And I think Ms. Kushner may have sent some thoughts as well. And I'll call you back at around 3:20.
And produce one document that will
That, okay.
wrap up your conversations and have your reporter be prepared to share out. All right, come on back to the horseshoe.
We gotta submit something.
All right. Thank you all for those discussions. I do want to acknowledge that you all have had maybe 20 minutes to see this and to start processing it and thinking about it. And it was a process that took months and months and focus groups and data analysis for folks to go through. So we will come back to this, to be fair to you, and to really build our understanding of what it is and what it's designed to do. So as we close out our time today, we do want to hear from each of the groups around just some high-level thoughts that you had from your discussion. And you can just go through all three of your questions. You don't have to spell out everything that you talked about. Just share with us what your group talked about, general reactions that you had, and then I'll turn it back over to Dr. Gardner and Ms. Moore to close this out. So group one, Dr. Martin?
Who speaks, turn the mic on.
Oh, and whoever speaks, please be sure to turn the mic on.
Oh, okay. Hi. So this was our first time as a group seeing this theory of action. And so I think we had more questions about the process than necessarily following the questions that are on the page and understanding where it goes. One of our big questions was, in the historical data that was listed in the previous slide, it talks about relationships, but we don't explicitly see relationships called out. And then questioning, is this a top-down model? Is it a bottom-up model? Is it a circular model? And how is this implemented between central office and the other stakeholders listed in the group? So really, we had many more questions than commentary. And, where does this fit with the strategic plan? Does this inform the strategic plan? Is it informed by the strategic plan? And really seeing this as a group, for the first time, brought out a lot more questions than necessarily commentary that was in the questions asked.
Great, thank you. Group 2?
So, I was told, we want to be positive, so I'm putting on a smile as I say all of this. So I hope it went up to my nose. I'm smiling while I say all this. We're going to provide tough love. We're going to provide tough love because I think we may have missed something in the intent or the execution, but in what ways do you see our core beliefs aligned with the theory of action? And so we went through each of the core beliefs and we compared them to the theory of action. And we looked to see, was it aligned, was it misaligned, or was it sort of a push? And we found very little that we thought was aligned with the stated items in the core beliefs. Core belief 3 about supporting principals, teachers, and staff was maybe the closest core belief that seemed to be reflected in the theory of action. But even then, there was questions about other staff beyond classrooms and administrators. There were other areas in those core beliefs that it seemed in your research you identified needs looking at the historical data, but it didn't seem like they were addressed in the theory of action on several points. So when you had things in the core beliefs about eliminating the predictability of achievement or supporting diversity, we didn't necessarily see those reflected in the theory of action. And it might have been that they were intended, but the language we read did not communicate that to us. In terms of funding implications or policy, again, we seemed to, it appeared to us that the theory of action seemed to promote more autonomy in schools and classrooms than is currently allowed in practice. In that it sounded like a lot of these decisions and key decision points were going to be made at smaller levels, but we didn't see how that actually occurred and was taking place. So we had, I guess, the other thoughts and considerations. Again, we were just questioning the alignment of the theory of action to actual practices. We wondered how differentiated the support is that's offered to the schools. And then it just seemed like in many cases in the core beliefs we talk about other important stakeholders that seem to be left out or unaddressed by the theory of action. Again, understanding this is a theory of action that's coming out of central services, from the leadership team, maybe getting input from other areas, but who is it a plan for, and then who are you trying to reach in the plan? And it just seemed that between community, parents, the board, there were just areas that didn't seem to be touched in key parts of the theory of action where there should have been some connection, that would have been aligned. So that's the feedback that we had.
Okay, thank you. And my last group.
So I think we were a little bit different than the other two groups, and we saw a lot of connections in how the theory of action was aligned with the core beliefs, especially the well-supported, highly effective, and dedicated principals, teachers, and staff. This goes through and lays out. If central services does this, principals do this, teachers do this, then this is the impact on students. So for us, the theory of action really sort of serves or speaks to what the game plan is and how the district will execute our core beliefs. If you even go to that every student is uniquely capable and deserves to be challenged and engaged and blah, 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 it lays out how that happens. The one that talks about ability to predict achievement based on socioeconomic status, it lays out how we'll do that by focusing on it, understanding and implementing instructional core, by demonstrating leadership in their feedback and decisions. The one about innovation that results in a high-performing organization, it lays out how the district will do that. So we saw quite a bit of alignment in the core beliefs and the theory of action, and that the theory of action was really the playbook, if you will, for how the district will implement the core beliefs. In terms of policy and funding implications, the focus on differentiation we thought can be more expensive because we all, I think, sort of, really have place a high importance on differentiation, individualization being the key strategy behind this. That can likely cost more money because you may need more staff, more resources in order to really focus in and hone in on the needs of each individual student. So from a funding implication, the board might need to provide or engage in more support around that. And then also developing policy that supports differentiation and individualization. Not knowing what strategies SLT was thinking about in terms of how we arrive at that differentiation, if that means more pullouts, more, again, more staff, if that's more things when you think about diversity and same-race teachers. So what are the strategies for improving student achievement and differentiation and how we get there, being more human capital needs or things of that nature. So we struggle with this one in terms of what board policy will be implemented, just not knowing enough about the strategies in terms of how the SLT got there, but we're thinking that if we're aligning our thinking, that's what support policies implications that we have from the board. And then the last, in terms of what other thoughts or considerations would we have to offer, two things. One, what is the role that other support staff would offer or provide in this matrix? It speaks to central services staff, principals, teachers. There was a concerted effort, I think 2 years ago, when we had the McKimmon Center piece to try to include bus drivers, teacher assistants in the role of the district and improving student achievement and school performance, but sort of left out here. So is there a role for other support staff in the theory of action? And also, is there a role for the board in that? Because, and we kind of understand that we went back and forth, Heather chime in, what the question was, well, this is the theory of action. So then again, this is how the district operationalizes that action. So is this something that is more a staff function and not so much for the board? So perhaps the board doesn't have a role, but we would like to think that the board does have some role in student achievement and school performance. And if that's the case, we would argue then perhaps there is some block in here in this matrix that then, if central services does this, if the board, and where in this, if the board does this, then central services does this, then principals do this, then teachers, other support staff, in order for students, such and such. So.
Great, thank you so much. So I think that your questions and comments give us a great place to move forward from today, because we have a lot of things we need to answer for you and unpack with you. And I think that Mr. Haggerty had a really good statement around that you guys didn't see the alignment in actual practice, and that's exactly why we even embarked upon the work of theory of action, because we already knew that didn't exist. And so we'll talk some more about that and what the theory of action should do to help minimize that misalignment. And so I'll turn it back over to Dr. Gardner.
And I just wanted to add,
Thank you,
really quick to that, the discussion that Chair Sutton and I had. Ms. Kushner had emailed us and for an impact on funding implications. She discussed advocating for state funding that reduces privatization of public dollars so that the taxpayers receive better returns on public school outcomes and more efficient use of tax dollars. I thought that was another, just wanted to make sure that was put out there.
Thank you. Before I close, I just want to echo the appreciation for you wrestling with this. We knew you probably would, as we did for months, putting our arms around what a theory of action is, how it should be written, and how it fundamentally answers our question how we should structure ourselves to better support students and schools and the entire district. And so hearing your interpretations, how it speaks to you, how and what you see in it or missing helps us tremendously as moving forward. I have to echo, it is not the strategic plan, but it is just a piece of the process that helps guide one bridge to the next with regard to strategic plan or not. And again, fundamentally, it was trying to write a response to how do we structure? Are we structured the way we should be to support our schools and our students? It is a very integrated, meant to be an integrated approach of support. And one thing that we think might help is we probably can give you the Wallace document that kind of helps also show how it's structured and the way we kind of pattern it after that based on research for what it should say and what it should speak to. But your input has been great. The feedback we will certainly take back, and we will continue to wrestle with it, I know, as a board in the coming months, as well as the work moving forward that builds way beyond that with regard to the strategic priorities. Superintendent Moore, do you want to make a comment before I close?
Just real quick. So I think the feedback has really been important, and really how you lay the context and the groundwork for where we end up. So I wanted to say a couple of things in closing to give you some things to think about, and then we'll send you a few things to follow up with it as well. In our last strategic plan, one of the disconnects that we found as we worked through it was that there was not a clear alignment in how central services should work, whether they are collaborating across divisions and departments or working within their divisions or departments to support schools and students in the implementation of the vision that was behind the strategic plan. So the work of a theory of action really is to transform central services structures and processes and governance so that as we move into a new strategic plan, we have some alignment in place for what we mean by how we collaborate with each other, how we work through the systems to get to students. And the Wallace work specifically outlined and researched some specific areas that needed to be included in a theory of action in order to transform central services governance. And those areas were, what is it we want to see in student learning? What is it we need to see in teacher practice? What do we need to see in principal practice? And then what does central office practice, structure, and systems look like? So those are the 4 chunks that you saw today. It is about central office transformation in order to prepare for the work of building a strategic plan that has a better chance of being successfully implemented across all divisions and departments, because there is alignment around what our goals are and how it is that we get there, to ultimately provide the agency and license that needs to happen at the classroom level, because we all at Central Services are on the same page about what that means and how we provide that support to schools. So that's a really big sort of overview, some pieces that there's a lot more that I could go into, but we'll send you some additional information about it. It is really, it's like a ground level work of how we prepare ourselves to do the next steps that engage in the strategic plan that are much more explicit about some of the other pieces that are in place that you were trying to figure out where's the trust, where's the relationships, where's the agency, where's the capacity building, where are the individual divisions or departments or other places. That eventually all of that does come. But this is really about first transforming how we organize ourselves at Central Services so that we have the alignment, the common language, the structures in place about understanding how we work together before we begin to try to support implementing a district strategic plan across 190-some schools. Because what tends to happen, and this happens all the time, and it's why Wallace did the research, is the strategic plan at any district becomes what an individual school decides is most important and fits for them, that it just fragments as you move out of Central Services. And it's okay if it fragments with productive sort of goals, or if it fragments in the sense that it becomes customizable or differentiated for what school or student needs are. But not if it fragments because the support that's coming from Central Services doesn't promote that kind of outcome at the school level. And so more to come. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore. And one last word on something I did hear as I circulated around is the focus on relationships, trust, that teacher learning experience. It is not to be minimized in any way. In fact, it's supposed to elevate that. And although some of you wrestled with not necessarily seeing it spelled out, it is embedded in certain elements, and we're taking your feedback of what you're sharing with us about maybe not seeing it as clearly explicitly pointed out as key factors. So thank you for that. It is intended to elevate it and not at all minimize it in any way. So thank you for that. So in summary, thank you, Chair Sutton and the members of the board for this afternoon. This has been a great, productive afternoon, kind of as a first step with engaging in the board about the next version of strategic priorities. I hope that we'll have opportunity to do this more often in the coming months ahead to engage in this important work. I will reinforce the group that probably starting the year will have a slower entry into the strategic plan after having the COVID experience that we did, so that schools can have the time they need to be mindful of what they need to have their students ready for learning. It doesn't mean that we will not have a focus, but a focus that will probably bridge and lead into the strategic priorities that we eventually adopt. The other thing is that I would like to emphasize that we will continue with our focus sessions to gain input from all of our stakeholder groups, probably starting near the end of the summer into the fall, and we look forward to our continued next steps with you as a board. Thank you for this afternoon. We appreciate your time. And thank you for your hard work in the small group sessions. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner, for leading us through this work as our Chief of Staff. And one of the responsibilities is strategic planning that falls on you. So thank you and your team for this work. We will continue to work on this. We can assure you of that. It may be, as a board, that we will continue in these many retreat sessions because it has proven to be sort of difficult to find that time on what we normally do as a retreat, Friday evenings, Saturday mornings, or that sort of thing. So we will probably continue in this vein and sort of grabbing or stealing sort of these 2.5-hour chunks of time. It won't always be before a work session and board meeting because we know that this makes for a very long day. So as I say that, I kind of particularly encourage committee chairs, as we talked about this the other day, if you've got a committee meeting one month and you have a light agenda and you don't mind dedicating that 2 hours of your committee time to one of these mini retreats, we would certainly welcome the opportunity to bring the board together if it meets everyone's approval and schedule to do another 2 hours. I think that would be preferable than waiting another 3 months or 4 months and sort of continuing to kick this can down the road, but really getting a grip on this work so that we can move into the focus groups and the community part and that we're all sort of seeking that alignment that we're looking for as we move forward into this strategic planning work. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. We look forward to it. And on behalf of Beth and myself, the chief officers and the superintendent's leadership team, thank you for your feedback, constructive feedback today. We're grateful. Thanks.
So with that, we will end this retreat. We'll get ready to move into our work session. Again, I know we've got a long day, so we'll take about 10 minutes just to kind of allow for some transition and downtime before we get started. So we'll start the work session in about the next 10 to 15 minutes and go from there. So thank you all. Oh, and Dr. Gardner, if you all would send that, just go ahead and send that work. You mentioned the Wallace work that serves as the foundation for this so that board members can begin to sort of read that and acclimate themselves. That'll help with the theory of action work too. So thank you.
Thanks.